Celtics lose 90-78. Andrew Perna's in the house. We're on the court tonight. No drills going on, but the Celtics did get drilled pretty badly.
Ooh.
Garden Report, Celticsblog, CLNS Radio. Welcome to the Garden Report, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jared Weiss from CLNS Radio. With me, as always, Jimmy Toscano from Celticsblog. And with us for the first time on this show, old buddy of ours, Andrew Perna from Real GM.
Good to have you. Thanks for having me, guys.
He's looking very sharp. He's not touching himself
right
right now.
Anytime. You said it.
So Andrew will be on every single time that we shoot the show for the rest of eternity.
I'm the new call.
The Celtics lost 90-78. The storyline before the game is the return of the prodigal son. The storyline after the game is he returned, didn't really do too much, but they won anyway.
But they won.
Yeah, so pretty exciting storyline. We're going to talk about Austin Rivers, all the emotions, all the tears pouring down the cheeks of everybody. No, not really. Nobody really cared. And then we'll talk about getting to the penetration. Penetration was an issue for these guys in a very sexually charged Garden Report so far. And then we're gonna box out and ball up
or
with
lack
you,
thereof.
as we always exactly. I mean, I am rocking purple, so I'm trying to keep it a little bit exciting. So Austin Rivers, he scored 1 point, I think, in the game before this one. He scored 8 points tonight. So he didn't really have
8 times the production of the last game.
That's true. So for all your multiplication fans out there, but he didn't look great tonight. But before the game, we heard they actually had a pregame actual official press conference for Austin. That hasn't happened. And were you there?
I was there.
I thought I saw you there.
Yeah, I was there.
I saw someone was like, "Oh, that looks like Jimmy."
I wanted to be there because I knew it was a special occasion.
So Jimmy did his job tonight. That's pretty good. But they, at least in the 2 years I've covered the team, they've never done that before. Andrew.
No, I mean, that's usually reserved for playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not even a Celtic that gets his own press conference before a game. So obviously everybody knew it was a story. Everybody had to talk about it. So him and Doc answered the questions. I think it was a little interesting. He seemed to be a little bit more affected by it than Doc.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Well, in a way, I think that Doc was affected in the sense where he didn't really want to play against. He didn't want to coach his son.
No.
He made that pretty clear.
Right, he made that. Yeah, because he basically said, after the game too, he said it was weird. It was awkward, and I think Doc's kind of happy that it only happens twice a year as opposed to, it could be 4 times a year if they were in the East. So that was, that's a good thing. But Austin's kind of like, it's easier for me because I'm just going out there and playing my game. It's not like where Doc has to game plan against his own son, a kid that he's been obviously cheering for his entire life and rooting for. And now on this night, he sort of has to, in a way, balance being proud of what his son's doing on the court, but also not to the point where it's going to, make the Celtics lose. And I think that's sort of tough for a parent to have to do.
And one of the weird things, we'll just let Doc tell you.
It was strange. It was funny. One time he did something. I was about to say something, and I didn't say. I caught myself. Forgot he was on the other team. Other than that, it's just a strange dynamic. I didn't enjoy it, honestly. I know it's neat for everyone else, but as a father, I don't know if I enjoyed that. You detach from it, but you do see them. I mean, you see your son run by you down the floor. That's just different. The one time he made the layup in front of our bench and run right by you. I'm used to keep going. And instead I'm yelling at my guy for letting him get to the basket. So it's just different. George Carl this summer were laughing, and he said, it's going to be strange. And he said, your guy's going to play more. And he said, and he was right.
Doc almost forgot which team his son played for. And they kind of talked, both of them talked about how they've had a tight bond as far as just training each other, how Austin has always tried to be competitive with his dad. I think he said that he was starting to beat his dad once when he was in 8th or 9th grade or so, and his dad would just get pissed off and punt the ball over the fence.
Yeah.
But Doc talked about both of them talked about how important it was to develop that kind of bond of coaching throughout throughout his childhood, and the fact that Doc is still trying to do it now. I mean, Jimmy, do you think what's your assessment of Austin at this point as an NBA player?
Well, first of all, I think that obviously Doc's competitiveness has rubbed off on his son because, like you said, they went they've been back and forth when Austin was a kid, and Doc never let his son win. I know Austin said that his dad used to be in everything, including like board games, like Connect Four you mentioned, and I think Austin said it was the 8th or 9th grade where finally he beat Doc, and like you said, Doc kicked the ball over. But I think that that's really helped Austin's game, clearly having a guy like that to play against. And I think the one thing Austin doesn't lack is confidence. And I know that his coach, Monty Williams, mentioned before the game that that's the one thing. The one reason he's glad that he coaches Austin is because he doesn't think a lot of coaches would be able to deal with the confidence Austin has. And what that means is, Austin could have a bad game like he's had in the past and sort of like brush it off and still have a confidence to take the same shots, in the next game and the next game after that. And I think as a rookie, and I talked to a couple of players, I talked to Paul Pierce, and he said, confidence, aside from a strong work ethic, is the most important thing to have as a young player, because you're playing against these, grown men, NBA players, and you need to be confident in your game if you want to ever be successful.
No, I mean, for sure. I mean, Jared, you said he had 1 point in his last game. I think he had 1 point in his last 5 games. And he comes into an environment like this where the media is hyper-focused on him, playing at the Garden against players that he knows pretty well from, being around his dad. And he didn't blink. I mean, he didn't have a great game, but, 8 points or whatever it was, an assist. Good plus minus, obviously helped by the fact that they won.
Yeah.
And, just not at all scared in the moment, which I think obviously is something you get when you grow up with a dad like Doc, who experienced everything at the professional level and was able to pass those things down onto his son.
And he showed flashes, and I think that's been him all season. One game he's there.
Mm-hmm.
I know me and you looked at his career high, season high, and it was 27 points, and we're looking at like, wow, he scored 27 points this year, and you don't see that, like tonight, you don't think that that's something that could happen, and obviously the last couple of games, but he sort of have an up and down season so far, and I think once he finds himself as a player, the later and later he gets in his career, he'll become more and more consistent, and like you said, the background that he has, I think, there's no reason to believe that he can't be a successful NBA player eventually.
And we saw tonight he had he had a couple of them, but he had this one dribble drive where he crosses up, I think it's either Rondo or Bradley on him. He gets into the paint, Bass goes up, and he's able to kind of do an up and under finger roll type move on Bass, which worked great. He hit the shot. The guy can score. He can get into the paint. And that was an issue for the Celtics. They could not get into the paint tonight. Doc said in the post-game press conference that they had all sorts of issues. Let's take a look at what he said.
Yeah. Well, they scored in the paint, and we refused to go in the paint. We had an electric fence around the paint tonight. We just settled, I thought. That's how you play when you don't, like, I don't know what the new word is, bring it, or whatever you young people say. Whatever that is, we didn't have. And we settled. We took the easy shots. We didn't cut. We didn't space. We didn't run offensively. I thought we played 6 great minutes at the beginning of the game. Played with a lot of energy, and then it just dissipated.
So the electric fence was an issue. They were getting shocked every time they tried to get around it. I mean, Perna, I thought Rondo was able to get into transition, but they weren't really running sets in which they were able to get the guy catching the ball, moving towards the rim, and actually being able to get past the free throw line. And that because of that, their spacing wasn't really working.
No, that's true. They didn't drive a lot. The Hornets, that seemed to be what they were looking to do. We looked at the points in the paint, 48-32. The Celtics shot awful from the foul line, but the teams had the same number of fouls. So, obviously they weren't attacking the rim. I know Pierce mentioned the fact that, Monty Williams was just cycling out bigs. None played 30 minutes, but you got Anthony Davis, Robin Lopez, Jason Smith, and they were just cycling them in for energy to make sure that guys were active. And the Celtics just either didn't want to attack them, or, like you said, the points weren't putting them in the right position to get into the paint. And it seemed like they were settling for jumpers. At times in the first half they were going. I think at one point in the first half, towards the end, they were shooting like 52%. They scored 25 points in the first quarter, and eventually they just stopped hitting them, and then the offense just stagnated from then on.
Yeah, and I thought it wasn't so much the bigs I had an issue with. I thought the guards weren't aggressive going to the paint tonight, because when you look at the shot attempts, you have only 8 from Rondo, only 4 from Bradley. Terry went 5 of 10, but a lot of his shots are not from the paint. We saw, even on a fast break, he'll pull up and he won't drive to the hole. I think, and it's, your guards have to be aggressive. And I thought Rondo, and there are some plays where I do remember Rondo making some really nice drives and those circus finishes that we see from time to time. But I know Kevin Garnett, 7 of 12 tonight, Bass, 4 of 6. It wasn't like those players were being denied points when they took the shots. I thought it was the guards that maybe needed to be a little more aggressive.
All right, let's move it along to boxing out. Perna, I mean, what was your stat of the night?
I would say the stat line for me has to be foul shots. 6 for 16 for Boston. That's just not a lot of attempts, and it's just an awful percentage, obviously. You got to get at least 12 or 13 if you're only going to take 16. And the Hornets had about 26 and 31, so they were driving. I mean, they were doing exactly the opposite of what the Celtics, were doing. They were driving it. Vasquez, everybody was going into the paint. They had no problem attacking the Celtics bigs, and that's one of the huge reasons why they won.
Good stat.
Thanks.
My stat
so
is
genuine.
My stat is 22.2%. That's the Celtics field goal percentage from 3-point range. If you're not going to drive to the hoop and you're not going to be aggressive in the paint, then you better be hitting your outside shots. Yeah. And when you go 4 of 18, well, then obviously that's a recipe. That's a recipe for a loss because you're not being aggressive in the paint and you're not hitting your outside shots. So where's the scoring coming from? What are you taking? Long range twos? What's going on? So, a night like that, and I think it goes back to what Doc said before the game, after the game, was that there was no urgency. It just seemed like it wasn't intense enough, especially in the fourth quarter. It seemed like we're all waiting for them to turn it on, and it never happened. And the Hornets came out flat to start the fourth quarter, and the Celtics could not capitalize. And eventually, when the Hornets, snapped out of it, the Celtics maybe they snapped out of it a little bit too, but there wasn't enough. They didn't close the gap at all. And it goes back to the outside shots and goes back to the what's in the paint.
My number is 11. That's rebounds for Gravis Vasquez. Not Rajon Rondo, but Gravis Vasquez, of all people, stacking up the rebounds. Wow. I mean, the guy's definitely one of the most improved players in the league this year.
Right.
And to see him have such a well-rounded game. Now, he did have 6 turnovers. He did go 1 for 7 from deep. It's pretty hideous numbers. But he overall, I thought, had a really solid game. And for me, he was my baller of the night. See, smooth segue right there. Didn't even announce it. But, for me, Gravis just had a really solid all-around game. And he was kind of the steady hand for them throughout the game that they really needed. So balling up.
Baller up. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to say the bigs, the New Orleans bigs, because I didn't think any one of them really stood out above the rest, but I just thought that, Aminu, Davis, and Lopez, those 3 guys, when you look back to the points in the paint, 48-32, rebounds, 48-33. I mean, those are 2 huge differentials. I mean, aside from the free throws, I think those are the 2 other biggest reasons that the Hornets won tonight. So props to the big 3 of New Orleans.
The big 3 is how they're known nationally.
The big 3.
That's what the ESPN calls them, right? The big 3.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a little more specific than Jimmy is. We all know if somebody was going to cheat on the show, it would have been him. I'm going to go with just Aminu. 18 and 8. From the foul line, 12 for 13. I mean, he hit double the number of foul shots that the Celtics hit and almost attempted as many. When we talked about, the guards penetrating, but, he was just banging in there. He had a couple of and one, at least a couple of and one opportunities. And he looked, for a guy who we've kind of been waiting to fulfill his promise, he looked awesome tonight against Celtics, and he's my baller of the game.
And his name's Al Farouk, which is pretty awesome first name.
He has a hyphen in his first name. Yeah. That's special.
I think he's literally a prince.
I heard something
prince
like
from
that.
Nigeria.
I heard something like that, which makes me wish I talked to him after the game.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he and Pas Mensah-Bonsu can or is it Luke Richard Mamute? One of those other 2 guys are. African guys with long names are probably going to be princes.
I think he's the guy that keeps sending me the emails about transferring some money. I don't know.
Yeah.
No comment on that one. Andrew, thank you for joining us. Thank you for having the softest manly voice.
Hey, no problem.
And soft hands.
Oh my God, look at that. Liquidy.
I moisturize.
Shake my hand anyway. Just
ooh, yeah.
Shaking hands
those
in a while.
Those are pretty soft too.
Small stature, but very firm handshake.
That's what I was taught.
Yeah.
I'm going to sign this off nice and smooth. Andrew Perna from Real GM, Jimmy Toscano from Celticsblog. My name is Jared Weiss. Tune in to this show on iTunes, on the CLNS Radio iTunes feed, on the Celticsblog YouTube page, and being broadcasted on CLNS Radio the day after the game. Shout out to Danush, trying to get my shout outs in as much as I can. Shout out to the Celtics for losing 90-78. This is the Garden Report on Celticsblog and CLNS Radio.
Shout out to Kate Upton, who I got a call after the game too.
Call it, Kate.